Welcome. Thanks for being here on Wednesday afternoon or evening. I want to begin my talk with a story. And this is a story of my friend. His name is Tony, and he's this guy over here. The guy who's not me, by the way. Yeah, that's Tony. The funny thing is, we once spoke together at a conference, and then I had to speak after him. So I had to introduce myself as the other good-looking Chinese guy. Yeah, good thing that thing this stuck, this stick. Otherwise, I'll be forever known as the other good-looking Chinese guy. Yeah. So this is Tony. Oh, by the way, anybody cannot hear me, just let me know, okay? Then yeah, I try to put the mic closer to my mouth, but try not to eat the mic. It doesn't taste very good. Trust me, I know. Anyway, Tony. There's something very special about Tony. Tony, at the age of 24. He co-founded a company in his late teens, early 20s. And then when he was 24, he sold his company, which is called LinkedIn, to this other company called Microsoft. Yeah, and he sold the company for, if I remember correctly, $264 million or something. Yeah, so overnight he became very rich, right? And then, so what happened after that? After he became very rich? Any guesses? What did he do? Stay in Singapore. Very funny. If it's Eduardo, the answer is yes. So anyway, when I speak about this in Silicon Valley, everybody raised their hand and say, "Oh, I know. He found a new company." Yeah, almost true. Well, in the moment he became rich, he just fulfilled his dream, and his dream at that time was to live very close to a movie theater and Taco Bell, which was a fast food place selling taco. Yeah, so with his vast fortune, he bought an apartment next to Taco Bell and a movie theater, and he was very happy. so that lasted for a while, and then he started itching again, right? He wanted to run a company again. So he didn't found a new company. He invested in this company called Zappos. Somebody heard of Zappos, right? So they're a company that sells shoes online. Interesting thing about Tony was, or what his genius was, the part of Tony's story that most inspired me was what he did at Zappos. So he joined Zappos as a CEO. At that time, the company was failing, and he was like the largest investor. So he's seeing his investment going to zero. Right? So he decided to intervene, and then he went in to become CEO, and then he put in more money. And then he had this idea, which was at that time, maybe even today, a revolutionary idea. The idea is, what if we deliver happiness? Right? And that became his corporate motto eventually, delivering happiness. But here's his idea. His idea is, if he and his management team delivers happiness to his people, his employees, and then his employees deliver happiness to customers, then the customers will be getting happiness. And then what happens? Then they'll be happy and they keep coming back. They spend more money, right? And not just they spend more money, they stay. They stay as customers, they buy more things, and they tell all their friends. So what are examples of what he did? For example, Tony's shop, Zappos, his customer support people, they don't have a time limit to how much time they can spend on the phone. So the charter is spend as much time as the customer needs. So sometimes very lonely people call, and the last I heard was 7 hours, one phone call, because the guy was lonely. So he keeps coming out with new ideas, something to talk about. So 7 hours. And then, so the other thing I did is you can call Zappos for anything, but don't do it, okay? Because otherwise, Tony's going to kill me after this. But I tell you what I did. So the reputation is that you can call Zappos customer service, ask them anything, and they'll find answer for you, whether or not relating to their product. So one day I called them, I find out where to eat. So I was in their area, I called Zappos customer service, I say, okay, I'm in your area, where should I eat? and they found me a restaurant, it's very funny. The customer service at Zappos was so good that they are rated more highly than Four Seasons Hotel. 4 seasons. It's a company that's been there for 100 years or something. And some .com in Las Vegas, not even the Silicon Valley. and they had this comparable customer service. It's kind of fascinating. So Tony's story, to me, it tells you something. It tells you that you can actually do good in business in a way that makes you a shitload of money. So in Tony's case, his company went from zero when he took over, and it was a dying company, to $1 billion in sales annually. In a few years, 0 to 1 billion. And then you think that the type of customer service they provide, they're going to spend a lot of money on customer service, right? So I asked him the question, and he says it's true. However, he saves a lot of money on marketing because he doesn't have to do any marketing, right? Because the customer is the marketing. So here's an example of goodness. Goodness used that is also good for business. Or in that, I met a guy, his name is Feng Lun, Chinese guy. And the way he likes to put it is, it changed the world, and the word he says, 顺便赚钱. Right? You do good things for the world, and oh, by the way, you also earn money on the way. So that approach, I find very inspiring. So Tony is just the best example, and he's not the only example. And there are a few that, if you have time later, we can talk about the other examples. So this is about goodness in business. Specifically, I want to talk about compassion. Before I talk about compassion, there is a study that I found fascinating, which was a study done in, I don't remember where, but it was in this book by Kozus and Barry, which they're from Stanford. And some of you heard me talk about this story before. And in this research study, they were studying in a company. They tried to figure out who are the top 25% of performing managers, the top quintile managers, versus the 25% performing managers. And the idea is, let's try to figure out what is the difference, right? What differentiates the top performing managers from the bottom performing managers? And it turns out there's only one difference, which was surprising. And that one difference was affection. The top performing managers, they love people, but they don't just love people, they want to be loved. And it makes them the top performing managers, which at first is a bit surprising. Like, you might think, if you're in the working world, especially if you're the boss, you have to choose between being good and being profitable. Right? If you are good, then you right? You can't get anything done. If you are earning money, you can't be good. However, this research, and I think many others, show that it's a false dichotomy. You don't have to make a choice. Right? You can choose both at the same time. And in fact, choosing both is optimal strategy. And that's a very simple reason. The reason is, if you are the boss, the more people love you, the harder they work, the higher the quality of their work, right? And that reflects on your performance. And it's especially true in the kind of work that is not immediately quantifiable. So in the case of laying bricks, for example, you can measure, right, how many bricks is laying per hour. So you're not laying a brick, you can just whack him, just bully him to work. However, something else, like solving creative problems, like software engineering, for example, creativity, making movies. There's no way to quantify productivity. Right? You cannot say, wow, this guy wrote 2,000 lines of code per week. This guy only wrote 10 lines of code. This guy is better. You cannot always say that because his 10 lines of code is better than his 2,000, right? For example. So in cases, especially in cases where productivity is not easily quantifiable, this thing applies very well. And some of you will know this is true even in the Navy, in the US military. There was a research study showing that even in the military, the highest performing military commanders are people with high emotional intelligence and who are perceived as nice people. And that study, the title of the study was Nice Guys Finish First. Right. Sorry, I forgot to prepare the comic. That's a very funny comic. So anyway, today I want to talk specifically about compassion, but before I talk about compassion, I want to explore something else, which is a fundamental skill, a skill which is fundamental to all social skills, including compassion. And that skill is empathy. Right? Empathy, oh. There's something very interesting about empathy. The neuroscience of empathy. So first we know what empathy is, right? Empathy is basically understanding other people. Understanding people First, understanding people's emotions, but not just understanding their emotions, not just how they feel, but beyond that, like what do they want in life, right? How do they best, how we can best develop them, like how we can best help them, how we can lead them. So that's empathy. There's something very interesting about the neuroscience of empathy, which is that it was discovered by accident. And the story was this. It was in the University of Parma in Italy. And as part of the study, so they have a group of monkeys in the lab. And the monkeys were all hooked up to some scope of some sort. And specifically, what was being measured was certain neurons. Right? So in some specific monkeys, for example, they found the part of the brain, the neurons, that activate whenever monkey pick up food. Okay, so every time monkey pick up food, the thing will beep. Okay, and here's the interesting thing: a researcher was giving food to monkeys, so he was handing out food, and as the researcher was picking up food, the monkey's head go like beep, beep. So there's only, again, as usual, there's one obvious conclusion, right? There's something wrong with the equipment, right? Obviously, right? Because and this is, for those of you who does neuroscience, this is even more interesting. The part of the brain that was being monitored was the premotor cortex. It's a part of the brain that activates before the motor cortex, so before command. Right? So this is a command-giving part of the brain. And that part of the brain triggers. And after some investigation, it turns out it's not an equipment problem. It turns out there is something called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are the part of brain cells that activate whether the animal, including humans, whether you are doing an action or the animal perceive another animal to be doing the same action. Like, for example, picking up food or seeing another animal pick up food. Right? And the same part of the brain activates. So for the first time, it was discovered by accident. Let me see. They're called mirror neurons. And for the first time, we found the science behind monkey see, monkey do. And the other picture you see, so they found the neural mechanism for imitation. And so another research question was, where does this mechanism come from, right? Like how early does it begin? So they took a monkey, a macaw monkey in this case. This was a newborn monkey. So they monitored the monkey closely since its birth. So this monkey was like untainted. Like the monkey never see any other animal sticking out its tongue. So the research question is, if you stick out a tongue in front of the monkey, does the monkey imitate? And then the answer is yes. So what you're saying is the monkey business of science. When you think of science, you think of like very serious people with lab coats, right, doing serious stuff, right? But no, they're like feeding monkeys and sticking out the tongues of the monkeys. So that is science. So this is empathy. There's something else very interesting about empathy, which is the mechanism behind empathy, specifically this. Maybe I tell you the story and I tell you the result. The story itself is quite fascinating. So the story is this. Imagine you get a couple, let's say, let's pretend you're a couple. Oh, I think in real life you are, but let's pretend you're a couple. You get husband and wife, you talk to each other on tape, okay? So it's part of a lab experiment. And then as part of this experiment, you monitor their body measurements. So I measure your heart rate, skin conductance, blood pressure, and a couple of other things. So I just measure. And then, after the conversation is over, so I ask one of them to come back. So maybe I ask, let's say, the wife to come back, and they say, no, this conversation, I said, I play back the video, okay? And I tell each part of the conversation, tell me how you feel and the intensity at which you felt this. Okay, so I have data on her first person experience. And then let's say I get the husband, and I say, review the same video, and say, tell me what you think your partner is feeling. So now I'm getting data on the measurement, and how close they are is the measurement of his empathy, right? And here's the interesting thing. Remember, I was also measuring their body sickness? It turns out that the closer their body sickness align, the higher the empathy score of the husband. And vice versa. It works the other way around too. And that actually shows a hint to how empathy works. The way it works is through something called entrainment. And basically, it's a very cool word, or very cheap word, to basically say that in empathizing, we're actually just mirroring the other person's body. So if I'm talking to you, and then you're saying something very emotional, the way that works for when I empathize with you, the way it works is my body's signal start to match yours. Right? Your heart rate become my heart rate, your blood pressure become my blood pressure, and so on. And then my self-awareness mechanism reads that data. And then that's how I empathize. Which also explains why there's this part of the brain called the insula on both sides. If that part of the brain is strong, it's very active, the person is high in self-awareness and also high in empathy, because the brain makes use of the same mechanism. Right? Which also explains why, what I just said, that people with high self-awareness also tend to be empathetic, and the reverse. People who have low self-awareness, they tend not to be empathetic. It's all very fascinating. So having said that, the next question is this. The next question is how? How do you, given that it's so good, how do you develop empathy? Given that it's like the foundation of all social skills. Turns out it's very simple. Turns out it is just to create mental habits. I tell you how to do that, and I tell you what mental habits to create, right? To practice empathy. The way to create mental habits is very simple, and I'm quoting this person. Some of you might be familiar with this quote. Okay, those not familiar, come from the Buddha, you know. Okay. So that's what Buddha said. Whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. It sounds so obvious. Right? Of course that is true. Right? However, once you state it, suddenly you realize this is a profound insight, because it gives you a hint of how you can develop any mental capability that is based on a mental habit. So what is a mental habit of kindness? A mental habit of kindness is this. I tell you that in a minute. Sorry, I'm a bit disorganized today. Okay, but before I tell you the mental habit, here's a cartoon. So for those of you who cannot read the cartoon, here's a cartoon of me telling my student, what you frequently think, you will become. And the student became very distraught and went home. And the wife says, so what do you learn? And he said, that I'm going to become a hamburger. That is not what I'm saying, okay? So what are the fundamental skills or mental habits that allow you to be empathetic? Right? There are two. Oh, something even better, which is this. I'm going to show you how the mental practices that increase empathy. But even if you don't do that, remember something I said earlier, that those people who have a strong self-awareness also have strong empathy. Even if you don't do what I'm going to tell you later, if all you do is self-awareness practices, for example, if you do body scan, which we did, I think on Sunday, right, which is the practice of scanning your body, and if you bring attention to the head systematically, and then the face all the way down or the reverse, if you do that, if you systematically bring attention to different parts of your body, every time you do that, you strengthen the insula, which is related to your body sensation or awareness of body sensation. If you do that, you simultaneously strengthen self-awareness and empathy. So you get 2 for the price of 1. Right? And Guangshen Fa Si just gave me a CD of him guiding body scan. Yeah, so you just get a CD, you're done. You don't have to do this. Yeah, 2 for the price of 1. Very, very, very worth. However, if you want to do something in addition to that, this is what I'm going to do next, which is there are 2 practices for increasing empathy. The first is similarity, or seeing similarity in another human being, and the second is offering kindness. Kindness is easy, right? It's very obvious. If you're kind to people, if you're kind, then you become more empathetic. Very obvious, because you care more, you're more receptive, and people are more receptive to you. So there's more exchange of information for those of you engineers out there. And the mental habit of kindness is very simple. which is just this. Seeing a random human being and have a first thought, habitual, instinctive, effortless first thought. I wish for this person to be happy. First thought, I wish for this person to be happy. Right? That is a mental habit of kindness. And imagine if you had that habit. Right? You walk into any meeting, changes everything. You get stuff done. People like you. And the reason people like you is because this is detected unconsciously. Right? You wish for this person to be happy, and then it shows off in all your body signals, right? Your facial expression and the tone of voice and your posture, and it's picked up unconsciously, and their feeling is, I like this guy. And they don't know why. They think it's because we are very good looking. Right? But it's not just good looking, not just because they're wearing a nice Chinese suit, but also because you're wishing for this person to be happy. Right? So that's very obvious. And later on, we'll do a small exercise on that. The other one is a bit more interesting. Seeing similarities. So I'm going to make a statement that's obvious, and I'm going to show you the research that's fascinating, even though it's obvious. What is obvious is if you see somebody, and if you think this person is like me, just like me, you tend to be more empathetic towards that person. Right? Very obvious, right? And how strong is that effect? It turns out it actually has been studied before, scientifically. And the study itself I found fascinating. So here's how he studied this. So first, the premise, like how things work. So if you see okay, you're touching your face, right? If I do this, I can feel sensation on my face. And then if I don't do this, I put an electrode over here. And I turn on the electrode just a little bit, not like shock me to die, but no, just a little bit. I can feel the sensation due to the electricity, right? Imagine I figured out how much electricity I can turn up for my face to feel, okay? And I turn it down just enough that I don't feel it. And there's a name for it. It's called a sub-threshold stimulus. So under the threshold. Okay, so I give myself a sub-threshold stimulus. I cannot feel. However, if at the same time I get a sub-threshold stimulus, I see a video of my own face being touched, then I can feel this. The reason is because if you see a video of your own face being touched, the sensitivity of the neural system responsive to touch temporarily increase in sensitivity. Okay, makes sense, right? You get the idea, right? So here's the research question. The first research question is, if it's not your own face, you will see the picture of somebody else's face being touched. Does that still work? Any guesses? Okay. Yeah, answer is yes. Okay, that's a good one. Here's the next research question, even more interesting. Does it make a difference if the face is similar to your own? So for this study, they got this, again, done in Italy. I know Italians are very strange. They do strange studies. So they got a bunch of Italians, white guys, and then they got a bunch of black guys from Africa. And then randomly they show pictures of either white guys or black guys on the screen, their face being touched. And predictably, or maybe not predictably, what happened was, if a black guy sees a black guy's face being touched, he is more sensitive than if you see a white guy's face being touched. So it operates even at that level. Like, this person just like me, my race or not my race. Okay, that's interesting, but it's not like mind-blowing, right? But here's the next thing I found mind-blowing, which is this. What if the person that you see on the screen is your race, but you're told whether this guy is from your political party or not? Right, PAP or Hammer. Right? And so in this study, everybody in the study is white, and the two faces on the screen are the leaders of either one political party. And of course, before a study, they know which the political affiliation of the subjects. And it turns out the mere perception that this guy shares my political belief or not, that changes the sensitivity to that system. It's mind-blowing, right? Just thinking this guy is like me or not, just that one thought changes empathy at the level of your neurons, unconsciously. So the title of the study is, I feel what you feel if you're like me, or something like that. It's kind of a funny study. So, given that insight, it means that if we can, again, instinctively, habitually, and effortlessly, If our first habit, we look at human being, besides thinking, I wish for this person to be happy, you also think, this person is just like me. You have these two thoughts. Then you will have very strong empathy. And this thought of this person is just like me is very useful, especially in conflict. Like you have a disagreement, and then sometimes it's like very fundamental disagreements. Right? You cannot resolve it, but if you look at a person and say, this person is just like me, suddenly there's a breakthrough. Can I give you an example? So before we do exercise, one example is this. In Google, we have two different kinds of engineers. We have product engineers who create products and features, they make your search and make the buttons and so on. And then we have production engineers. And their job is to make sure Google doesn't die. Right? If Google crashes, it's their fault. Right? And by design, there is a little bit of tension within these two groups. So for example, for the product guy to push a feature, the production guy has to approve. Right? And then if you're not careful in that situation, if you have the situation long enough, what happens? Right? Either side you're on, you think, the other side trying to screw with me. Right? You think, well, that guy, he wakes up in the morning, the first thing he thinks, going to screw with me. Right? However, so I have a student in my class who was in this situation. Right? And then, after he took my class, he took the empathy class. He does a similarity exercise. And then he realized, oh no, that guy, most likely, he doesn't wake up first thing in the morning, you think, I want to screw with Bill. Most likely, he have other thoughts in mind. And he realized, wait a minute, if I were in his job, I'll be saying the same thing. I'll be asking, hey, do you do your security audit? Do you do your load test? No load test, no, cannot launch. Right? If I was in his shoes, I'll say the same thing. And then once he had the insight, problem started getting solved because there's no more bad feeling. So, question, how do you train these two mental habits? As simply as what I just said before, which is mental habit. Think about something often enough. It becomes a habit. How to do that? There's the formal way and the informal way. The informal way is just every now and then just do this. Every now and then, every hour or so, you walk out of your office, you look at random human being, and just think. No need to say anything. No need to do, just think. I wish for this person to be happy because she's a human being just like me. Then you do 2 or 3 human beings, then you go back to your work. Very easy, right? And then after it becomes sort of a habit. However, there's a formal practice to formalize this. And with your permission, I want to run this for a few minutes so that you can get an idea of what it is. So is anybody okay with this idea? I tell you what I'm going to do so that you can freak out and tell me, I can't do this, So I'm going to ask you to sit quietly to calm your mind for about a minute. And then after that, for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I'll just run through a few phrases. And these are phrases that has to do with seeing human similarity and wishing for others to be happy. So that's it. That's the entire exercise. Okay, shall we do that? Okay. So let's sit in a position that allows you to be alert and relaxed at the same time. Whatever that means to you. Alert and relaxed. That's all you need to do. And just rest the mind. Again, whatever that means to you. And if you want to, you can imagine your breath being, like a mattress, and your mind just very gently resting on the breath, whatever that means to you. Or if you prefer, you can just sit and just rest. And once again, whatever that means to you. And if you like, you can close your eyes. Or anytime you're getting sleepy, you can open your eyes and look in front of you and looking at nothing in particular. Or if you prefer, you can look at me because I'm so good looking. And with your mind rested, just pick somebody in this room, either somebody in front of you or behind you or beside you, doesn't matter. Just quietly, secretly pick somebody. You don't have to look at this person. You don't have to stare at this person. It'll be uncomfortable if you do that. All you have to know is that there's a human being beside me. That's all you have to know. And so I'm going to guide you with a few phrases. Just think to yourself, this person beside me has a body and mind, just like me. This person beside me has feelings, emotions, and thoughts, just like me. This person beside me has at some point in his life or her life been sad, disappointed, angry, hurt, or confused, just like me. This person next to me has in his life or her life experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. This person next to me wishes to be happy, just like me. And now I want to invite you, if you like, to invite some wishes to arrive for this person. I wish for this person next to me to have the strength, the resources, and the emotional and social support to navigate the difficulties in life. I wish for this person to be free from pain and suffering. I wish for this person next to me to be happy. Because this person is a fellow human being, just like me. And with that, let's bring the mind to rest for about 20 seconds. If you want to, again, imagine your breath to be a resting place and the mind very gently resting on the breath, whatever that means to you. Or if you prefer, just rest. And thank you for your attention. Okay, so that was like 4.5 minutes. How was this exercise? Any questions, reflections, comments? At this point? Quite easy. Okay, thank you. Anybody else found it easy? Yeah, let's raise your hand. Anybody found it easy? Okay. Anybody found it hard? Okay, one person. Okay, good. Anybody felt happy doing this exercise? Right, yeah, most people. Anybody felt unhappy, by the way? So, very tulan. No? There's something interesting about this exercise. There are a couple of interesting things. One is the happiness aspect, right? Being on the giving end of kindness is by itself a happy experience, right? And so if that's true, then you just discovered a sustainable source of happiness. Because all you have to do to be happy is just be kind to other people. You don't have to do anything, just have thoughts of kindness. Then you're sustainably happy. Like mind-blowing, right? No need to do anything. This practice saved my marriage. And in fact, I think it can save anybody's marriage. Like, so, and not just my marriage, all my relationships, important relationships, every time I have a fight with somebody, wife or anybody else, I use the practices from the previous class, right, to calm my mind. And then once I calm my mind, it turns out calming my mind is insufficient. It's necessary but insufficient. What is needed in addition to that is this exercise. I start to think. Now, for example, in my case, my wife, I imagine her. I mean, I can't see her, right, because she makes me so angry. Right? But I do imagine her. In the next room, I imagine. And then I tell myself, well, this person is a human being just like me. Right? This person is suffering just like me. I mean, being married to me, to charm, so horrible, so poor thing, Right? But she's a human being. She wants to be free from suffering. She wants to be happy, right? So I have those thoughts. Then I just marinate in that mind for a couple of minutes, and then I wish happiness. I wish for this person to be happy. I wish for her to be free from suffering because she's human being just like me. And then once I do that, like half my problems go away immediately. Right? Imagine having that tool. Right? The people you're closest with, the people you're the toughest fight with. You have the tool to wish for the person to be happy, and your half problems go away in 5 minutes. Right? Life-changing, right? If you can do that. And how do you get to that ability? Very simple. Just this practice. Do this over and over, you become an expert at this. It becomes instinctive. Right? Then it becomes a habit and a master in your mind that you can do. Anybody knows Jinpa, by the way, or heard of him, or know who he is? Okay, he's the Dalai Lama's principal English translator, and the scholar in his own right. But here's his definition. He defined compassion as a mental state endowed with a sense of concern for the suffering of others, and very importantly, I think maybe most importantly, the aspiration to see that suffering relieved. Which solved a very interesting problem. Before this definition, there was a debate. Is compassion an emotion? And the Dalai Lama said no. He thinks it's not an emotion, he thinks it's an aspiration. And I think this definition captures both. In fact, it's even more useful because something else Jinpa did, which was to tease out the components of compassion, and he teased out 3 parts. So the 3 components of compassion. The first is what he calls the affective component, which means I feel for you. So that's the first one. The second one is the cognitive component. So not just I feel for you, but also I understand you. Or if I don't, I try to understand you. There's a third one, most important of all, which is the motivation component. I want to help you. So combined, this is compassion. So some neuroscience behind it, very interesting stuff. Some of you heard me told this story about Matthew Ricard, right? Oh, sorry? The mic is coming to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, I just want to ask whether most of the things that you're sharing are in your book, because I'm scrambling to type and listen.
Okay, fortunately it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. I'll tell you something funny. Okay, this is off the script, but it's something funny. One reason I wrote the book is because I'm lazy. It's like, hey, if I put everything I know up to this point into this book, then nobody will want to talk to me, right? Because they say, everything can read here, why they pay attention to me? Then I can just play golf all day, right? So that was my intention. Yeah, it turns out the reverse. Now this book is a bestseller, everybody want to talk to me. Wow. There goes my golf time. So anyway, talk about this study. It's fascinating stuff. So anybody heard the story of Matthew before, by the way? From me? Okay. So most of you haven't heard the story of Matthew Ricard. Okay, this guy on the left, he's known as the happiest man in the world. And he was happiest man in the world in this way. He's a Frenchman, which is ironic. So I'm just kidding, for those of you French. And he's really, really smart. He has a PhD in microbiology. And from what I heard, he was, at the time, when he was young, he was, what do you call that? People have high expectations of him. He's going to be the next generation leader, next generation leading scientist. So after he got his PhD, what happened? he decided to become a monk. So I joke about him. I say, yeah, you become a monk because you couldn't join Google at the time. 1972, right? Google doesn't exist. So this next best career option. So anyway, he joined Google. He became a monk. And then he spent 40 years in meditation. So his lifetime meditation at the time of study was about 50,000 hours, lifetime of practice. So year 2000, the Dalai Lama has always been interested in science. Year 2000, the Dalai Lama sort of put his feet on the ground and he said, let's do this. This is important, right? Let's get a monk into a lab. Not just any monk, a monk with at least 10,000 hours of training. More better. So guess who is the most obvious subject? This guy, right? This guy, he's a scientist. A real scientist. Right? He speaks English. Right? He knows Western culture. And he has 40,000 hours or 50,000 hours of meditation training. So he's the most obvious person. So they go into the lab. And it turns out that there's actually a way to study happiness in the brain or to measure happiness in the brain. And Matthew went into the fMRI machine, and it turns out that he had the highest happiness ever measured by science by far. A couple of standard deviations from the mean. Right. So when the scientists saw this, again, only one conclusion. There's something wrong with the machine. So they make Matthew wait. And you know about fMRI, you cannot move your head, right? So there's a clamp. So anyway, he was in that state. They checked the machine, no problem. And it turns out, in fact, by the way, that after Matthew, other monks came to the lab, and they were able to achieve similar extremes of happiness. So anyway, Matthew gained the extreme of happiness. And then the question is this: what was he thinking? What can a monk be thinking that brings him to extreme happiness? Well, monks and monkey business, right? You know, right? Monkey, M-O-N-K-Y. And so what happened was this: Matthew was meditating on compassion. And the instruction was given is meditate on, what's the word? Undirected compassion. So compassion for all beings. And then when he was in that state, his happiness went to extremes. And I asked him, oh, by the way, before I say something, I want to tell you something. I want to say something about this graph. This is a graph of his anterior insula. And what's interesting about this graph is this: the blue line, the blue dotted line is a novice at rest, and the blue solid line is a novice asked to meditate on compassion. Nothing changed. So therefore, if you're a novice and I ask you to meditate on compassion, you say, nothing leh. Don't worry, that's normal. and don't feel discouraged, because what happened to you eventually in that practice is the red line. Right? So the broken red line is Matthew at rest, and the solid red line is Matthew meditating on compassion. So I asked Richie, the scientist, the main principal scientist, what does this mean? Right? This amplitude. And Richie says, this is the equivalent, emotional equivalent, of seeing an elephant charging right at you, on the positive end, created voluntarily, in a few seconds. So a mind of mastery. You can do amazing things in the mind, like create extreme compassion, extreme happiness on demand, just like that. So about happiness and the brain. So I asked Matthew his first-person experience. What does it feel like? And he confirms the study. He says that compassion is the happiest state ever. Like ever. You cannot achieve any happiness higher than compassion. So I asked him the most obvious question that engineers should ask, which is, what's the second happiest state? Yes, that's too hard for me. That's the next one. And Matthew says the second happiest state is open awareness. Open awareness, my interpretation of open awareness, is when your concentration, your shamatha, and your mindfulness, your shamatha and vipassana are perfect. It's so perfect that all thoughts and sensation comes and goes, and your mind is clear. Right? That state is the second happiest state ever, at least according to Matthew. And those statements I just talked about, to a meditator, that should be mind-blowing. The first thing that should blow your mind, it blew my mind, is that it turns out the monks were right. It turns out, because they keep saying compassion is bad, you'll be happy with compassion. They say, yeah, monks say nice things, right? So, or whatever, right? It turns out they're right, literally right. I mean, so there's neuro basis. The second implication, to me, mind-blowing is this, is that when I started meditating, I thought that peace and stability was the highest state. I thought that if I can perfect my mind of peace and stability, that's it. That's my goal. It turns out that's not a goal. It turns out if you do that to perfection, that's number 2. Number 1 is compassion. And it turns out you cannot perfect your own practice unless you practice compassion. So from a Theravada's point of view, it turns out the Mahayanis are right. I mean, everybody's right about everything, but that was an important point for me. Compassion, very important. Yeah, but you see, so this talk is supposed to be about success, right? I'm not just here to talk about compassion, good for your soul, happiness. There's something else very interesting, which is what's the implication for business leadership or leadership in general? The first thing is this. This comes from a book by this guy called Bill George. And he was CEO, he's very respected. He was a CEO of this company called Medtronics. And he was one of the most respected CEOs of his generation in America. And he wrote a book called True North. And that book is not just about his management leadership philosophy. He interviewed 200 leaders in America. And this is a collection of things they all agree on. And this is the first thing. They all agree on this, which is what is leadership. And leadership is a transformation from I to we. This is the most important process leaders go through. This is it. You cannot be a great leader unless you take this transition, going thinking about me to thinking about we. Very obvious. However, who has an advantage in this? People who practice compassion, because you're already there. Right? You don't need to think about it. This is your instinct already. So this is your first advantage. But beyond this, it gets better. There's something else, which is functioning of a team. So this comes from a book by this guy called Patrick Lencioni. And Lencioni studies how companies dysfunction, or how teams dysfunction specifically. And he wrote a very nice book, a very thin book. If you have time, you should read this. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it turns out, according to his study, that dysfunctions have a linear relationship, or he put it in a pyramid. So at the highest level, a team dysfunctions when it no longer pays attention to results. But where does that come from? That happens when there's no accountability. And that happens when there's no commitment, and so on. And right at the base, the cause of all team dysfunctions is this, the lack of trust. The lack of trust in each other in the team. Right? So that is like the necessary condition for a full functioning team. And again, as a compassionate leader, that's your advantage. Because you know how to inspire trust if you're compassionate. So again, this is your advantage. But wait, it gets even better. There's something else that was very compelling to me. And this came from the book called, let me see, what was it called? Good to Great. Anybody read the book, by the way? Good to Great? Okay, some small percentage of you. If you only read one business book in your lifetime, that's the book to read, Good to Great. Here's the reason why. Let me tell you the premise and I'll tell you why first. The reason is, when I read the book, I was already like in Google for a couple of years, like 5-6 years. And then everything looked familiar. It's like everything the book describes as best practices are things that we did in Google. So in a way, it was Google's manual. But if you didn't know, if you read the book and you see our history, you think all of us read the book and executed to the letter. But it was an accident. Right? So if you want to found the next Google, so follow the principles in the book, Good to Great. The premise of the book I found fascinating as an engineer. The premise is this: this was from Stanford University. They took all public companies, if I remember correctly, all public companies since 1965, figured out all the data, From 65 to 95, they look at all those companies listed on the American stock exchanges, and then look for companies that went from good to great during that time, which means that they were looking for companies that were good companies. They're not bad companies, they're good. And then suddenly, they become great companies. And great is defined as like outperforming their comparable companies by 3x or something, some ridiculously large number. And doing so for a very sustainable long period of time, which I think was 15 years. I don't remember the exact number, but it's fascinating, right? Those parameters. So they figured out what those companies are. They figured out what the comparison companies are. Excuse me. And then try to figure out what's the difference. So the first difference is leadership. So in the book, they found 5 levels of leadership. This is what they are, but you don't read the chart because it's kind of boring. I'll just tell you what it is. The important one is 4 and 5. Level 4 leaders are what they call effective leaders. They're both, yeah, effective leaders. Effective leaders are basically most CEOs, right? People who are capable enough to run a big company. However, these are not the good to great leaders. There's a very specific type of leaders that, in addition to being an effective leader, they turn companies or teams of companies from good to great. So then the question is this: what makes a good to great leader? Right? What characteristics does it take for a leader to be a level 5 leader? And it turns out that in addition to the level 4 competency, there are only 2 factors involved for level 5 leaders. The first is ambition. Level 5 leaders are very ambitious. And the second one, surprisingly, is the opposite, which is personal humility. Level 5 leaders are simultaneously ambitious and humble. And the reason is because their ambition is not towards their own glory. Their ambition is towards the greater good, right? For the team, for the company, or whatever they define as greater good. And because they're serving the greater good, they don't really care about their own ego. So they are personally humble as well. So paradoxical qualities. And just a comic to sort of make fun of that. Yeah, the comic is, for those who cannot read, is picture of me telling a boss, I say great ambition and personal humility. And you see guys like using humidifiers, humidity. Then the question is this: what is the relationship between compassion and level 5 leadership? In my opinion, it's fairly simple. If you remember the 3 qualities of compassion, they are this. They are the affective component, I feel for you. There is a cognitive component, I understand you. And there is a motivational component, I want to help you. If you superimpose this on the 2 qualities of level 5 leadership, which is they're humble and they're ambitious for the greater good, you put them side by side, what do you see? Well, I see this. I see that the first 2 qualities of compassion creates the conditions for personal humility. And the next one creates the conditions for ambition for greater good. And therefore, compassion is a necessary but insufficient condition for level 5 leadership. So therefore, if you are already a highly effective leader, if you are also compassionate, you can become a good to great leader. Yeah, your team will be outstanding. So this is the power of compassion in business. So having said that, let me see, my hour is more or less up. I wanted to do a meditation practice, but I'll just tell you what the practice is. Okay? I don't think we have time to do this because I want to leave half an hour for questions. I only have an hour left. Yeah, paise. I didn't time myself properly. Very sorry. But I'll tell you what the practice is. Anybody here is familiar with this practice called Tonglen? Okay. This is not Tonglen. I'll tell you why in a while. The practice is visualization. So a while ago, we talked about creating mental habits, right? There is actually a better way to create mental habits, which is to use this part of the brain behind you. The whole back of the brain the surface here, is used for visual processing and also for imagining like visual items. Right? So you can use that, you can increase your effectiveness at creating mental habits. And you sort of know that instinctively, right? Because if you visualize it, you can remember better, right? So the idea here is to use visualization as a vehicle for creating a mental habit. And specifically, the mental habit is this. I tell you the practice, and I tell you what it does. The practice is that after you sit for a couple of minutes where your mind is calm, you visualize goodness. You visualize goodness coming out of your body as white light. Okay? And then you breathe in. Again, just pretend only. It's not really white light, but to pretend to create the mental habit. You pretend, you breathe in the white light, your own goodness, into your heart. And then you multiply that by 10. And you breathe out goodness as brilliant white light to give to the whole world. You give goodness to everybody. And after you do it for a while, you breathe in the goodness of other people. Right? And you multiply by 10, you breathe out. The reason to do this, I don't actually believe that people radiate goodness as white light. However, this creates very useful mental habits. And these three parts of the practice specifically creates three very useful mental habits. The first one is seeing goodness in everybody. Because you get used to breathing the white light. You get used to seeing people as having goodness. Even those, I'm being recorded so I cannot say asshole. Even those very unpleasant people. Right? If enough practice, even they have some goodness. And if you think that way, the way you react to them is different. Right? Because even if those people have some goodness, then they deserve a little bit of respect. Right? And then with that respect, things get done. So that's the first mental habit. The second one is the confidence in myself. I can transform. I can multiply goodness. And the third one is the habit of spreading goodness to everybody. So these are the three mental habits. We don't have time to do this, unfortunately. But I tell you where it came from. It came from this practice called Tonglen, which we started doing in SIY, and then we realized that this, very hard, cannot be done. That most people cannot do this. So we switched to the other one. And here's what's Tonglen. Tonglen is, instead of breathing in goodness of yourself and bring goodness to others, you breathe in pain. And the way you visualize pain is disgusting, black, gooey stuff. So imagine disgusting, black, gooey stuff coming out of yourself, and this is your suffering, your pain. You breathe it in, into your body, Wow, very hard. And then you transform into white light and breathe it out. Right? And then worse than that, you breathe in other people's pain. Their disgusting, gooey stuff. You breathe it in. Very hard. So which is why we abandoned this. However, if you are brave, try this. This practice turns out to be, let me tell you what advantage it does. So it creates fearlessness towards pain. It's very powerful. It creates confidence. The very first time I did this practice, it lasted for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I don't remember. The very first time I did this, I found my own self-confidence bumped up. It was a very significant jump, and it was permanent, which is again mind-blowing, right? A 5-minute exercise results in a permanent increase in my self-confidence. Why? And I realized why when I reflected on this. Because one thing I realized that was holding me back is fear of suffering, fear of pain. And then once I found myself able to breathe in suffering, not just breathe in other people's suffering. Once I find myself able and willing to do that, that part of my holding me back went away. And then suddenly my confidence just increased. Because I say, suffering, I can handle. Yeah, this practice is life-changing. The Dalai Lama does this every day. This is one of his main practices. Can you tell a story? Okay. I want to end the story, but I'll tell you another story and then end with the story. This is a fascinating story. So, there are stories of torture in China. I mean, some of you, they may or may not be true, but let's assume they're true for a while. There are stories of monks being tortured in China. And some of the monks, they ran away and they came to Tibet, ran out of Tibet, or they were let out after like 20 years or something. And then they came to India. And then the Dalai Lama makes a point to meet all of them in person, talk to them a little bit. And there was one which was particularly striking, and His Holiness found it striking, which was this guy was being tortured in jail, tortured a lot. So His Holiness asked the monk, how do you feel when you're being tortured? And the guy said, every time I'm tortured, I'm very scared. And His Holiness asked, why are you scared? And the guy said, because I'm scared I'm going to lose my compassion for that guy. I was afraid I'll lose my compassion for the guy torturing me. Yeah, that blew my mind. I mean, this guy's being tortured. And the only thing I think of, don't lose compassion for that. Yeah, that's to me mind-blowing. And but it sort of gives you an idea of how good you can become as a human being with these simple practices. And to close this story, my prepared remarks. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of this guy called Paul Ekman. This is his picture. He is the guy who's not Tibetan. He's the other guy, the white guy. Just in case there's some confusion. Anybody heard the name Paul Ekman? Okay. Anybody who did psychology in school? Yeah, same people, basically. The reason it's the same people is because Paul Ekman is one of the most important psychologists of the last century. His work has been extremely important. Unfortunately, despite his prominence as a towering intellectual figure, he is extremely unhappy. And the reason he's extremely unhappy is because extremely angry. No, not necessarily unhappy. He's extremely angry because he had a very rough childhood. Right? His mom committed suicide, his father was abusive, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I tell you this because he tells these stories. Eventually, he ran away from home. He became a juvenile delinquent, and he was rescued. And then the people who rescued him saw promise in him because he's really, really smart. And eventually, Paul Ekman became the Paul Ekman of today, right? A towering figure in the scientific world. But even that, his childhood never left him. So he's always angry. And the way he described to me is that he said, every week in my life, I'm angry in an explosive way, in a way that I regret I say or do later, at least twice. Twice a week, this guy is angry in a very regretful way. So the story was, in 2000, he was invited by the Dalai Lama to a conference. So the Dalai Lama has this thing called the Mind and Life conferences. You heard of it? Usually it was in the Dalai Lama's living room. So once a year, he invites the world's top scientists in a particular field to talk about a particular field of science in his living room, with him chairing the meeting. And this particular meeting was about destructive emotions. And this story is told in a book. I mean, this whole conference was told about in a book called Destructive Emotions. So anyway, there was this conference. Paul was invited, and obviously, of course, he didn't want to go. I mean, he lives in San Francisco. He knows everything about Buddhists. Those bald people. He said, I want nothing to do with these people. Fortunately, his daughter Eve she's a volunteer in some Tibetan cause, so she really wants to see the Dalai Lama. And every person who participated can bring one person. And she wants to be there. and Eve, Paul told me, Eve is the only person I've never been angry at. So they have this very strong relationship. So Eve convinced Paul to go. So he went for this conference, 5-day conference in the Dalai Lama's living room. And the story was on the third day. On the third day of conference, during a break, Eve and Paul went to talk to the Dalai Lama. And the way it happened was, His Holiness was sitting in the center, Eve was sitting on one side, Paul was sitting on the other side, and his entire time, it lasted about 10-15 minutes. His Holiness was looking at Eve, but he was holding Paul's hand. Right? And in those 10 minutes, Paul melted, completely changed. And at the end of 10 minutes, his anger completely went away. And he told me later that for a few weeks after that, the anger did not even arise at all. Now, of course, after a few weeks, it all came back. But even that, to Paul Ekman, there's a huge life change, right? To not experience anger at all for weeks at a time. And all it took was the Dalai Lama holding his hand for 10 minutes. So I asked him, like, what was the first person experience? What does it feel like to be there? And he says, it felt like goodness. His perspective was, he felt like goodness enveloping his entire being. And his problems went away. And Paul Ekman being a true or something else, which is during that conference, he changed. I mean, he didn't just lose his anger. He rediscovered his idealism. He rediscovered why he entered psychology, which was to help people, help the world. So he canceled his retirement plans. He started studying meditation, started studying compassion, which is how I got to know him, because he became one of the people I work with. Oh, where was I? Okay, that's the next part. So that story is fascinating, right? There's another fascinating part to it, which is Paul being a scientist, being a true scientist. He tried to investigate the phenomenon. And one of the things he did was he went back to ask His Holiness, like, what do you do to me? And His Holiness says, I didn't do anything. So His Holiness strongly says, at least he says that I didn't do anything. All the goodness was you. So it doesn't, I mean, I don't know the true stories, but what it occurs to me is it doesn't matter where the source of goodness comes from. As long as you perceive goodness, even if it is fictitious, even if your mind totally made it up, self-generated, as long as there's goodness can change a man's life. Right? Goodness changed Paul Ekman's life. He's 75 years old at the time. Changed his life, an old man's life. So, the reason I told you this story is that I think this is the highest level of managing with compassion. If your compassionate being is so strong that it can inspire people just with being alone, with goodness, then you can move mountains. You can be a great leader. And I hope that eventually, if you're not there already, eventually all of you will become beacons of goodness, and your being will change people's lives. And with that, thank you.
Hi, Meng. My name is Arthur. Yeah, I got a question, but before the question, I'd like to say a big thank you. Yeah, my whole family is deeply inspired from watching the talks you've organized in Google over the YouTubes. Yeah, and you're so right. Yeah? You're such a good-looking guy. Yeah?
Thank you.
So my question is about compassion. Yeah.
Oh, can I tell a joke about that?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't look like Brad Pitt, but I look like Brad Pitt's brother. His name is Arm. Oh, didn't get a joke. Armpit, you know.
Okay, especially when you turn your back, you really look like him. Yeah.
Late at night, a bit slow. Sorry.
So my question about the compassion is that please share with me your thoughts about you being compassionate to people, feel, help them, and then they betray your compassion, they lie, they cheat, they steal, despite many times you being compassionate towards them. Please share with me your thoughts. Yeah.
The important thing about compassion and kindness is this. Remember, I said that the habit of kindness. Remember, I say I wish for this person to be happy. I didn't say I wish to please this person. And what is important, I think, is seeing long-term happiness. So not like right now, but what is the best thing for this other person? And lying, cheating, betraying is not in his best interest. So that is basically the fundamental solution. And so and another way to look at it is this. Every time you prevent somebody, I shouldn't point at you, sorry, I was looking for an example, but every time you prevent somebody from committing evil, you're actually saving two people. You're saving the victim and you're saving the perpetrator. So to me, part of the Bodhisattva way is to prevent perpetrators from perpetrating evil. So part of compassion is that too. So it's not just about helping people, but also, not just helping people succeed, but helping them become good people as well. Yeah, I hope that helps.
I don't really get it. Yeah.
Sorry?
I don't really get it.
You don't really get it. Give me a specific example, a specific case.
For example, I'm running my own business, so there are staff that you help them, you feel, you understand, you really help them, and then they cheat, they lie, they stole, despite many times. So,
Yeah, fire them.
yes, of course I did.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the first time you should like grab their collar and just be fair. You say, look, you cheated, you lied. This is not acceptable. There's a very good example. This person called my heroes, Hewlett and Packard, Bill and Dave. I mean, they are my heroes in many ways. And one reason they're my heroes is that they're revolutionaries, right? They formed this company called Hewlett Packard in 1939, and they had this revolutionary idea. What if we treat people well? What if we respect them? What if we listen to them? And so on and so forth, right? And back then, that was a crazy, right? Back then, the idea is if you don't, they use the word bully, right? But if you don't bully your people, how do you get anything done? Right? So back then, management is that you whack them. I mean, not physically, but that is management. And Bill and Dave has this other idea. If we're nice to them, they do outstanding work. And it turns out, by and large, they were right. And not just they were right, it turns out they created a culture for Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley we are basically children of HP. However, having said that, there's something about Dave, which is that he's also very tough. And if any manager in HP crosses an ethical line, he personally flies over to their site and fires a person. He does it personally. He doesn't delegate that. He's very tough. So the story is that it's possible to be very nice, to be like revolutionary, world-changing nice, and be very tough at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Meng. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question about mindfulness, because
Yes.
mindfulness is remembering to pay attention in a wise and non-judgmental way.
Yes.
So what happens when sometimes we forget? So do you have any advice? And second,
Forget what, sorry?
forget to pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah, forget to be mindful. Then the second question is, I want to ask, how do you personally deal with unwholesome emotions like maybe jealousy or greed, or etc.?
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first question, I'm trying to figure out the best way to say that. Okay, so I give you the whole frame and then I come back to specific. The frame is when you're training mindfulness, it's actually training the two qualities, not just one. A lot of time when we teach mindfulness, we say we're training attention. It turns out there's another quality, maybe even more important, which is meta-attention. And meta-attention is the attention of attention. And specifically, it is the quality of knowing the attention wandered away. So just that alone, noticing, oh, my attention wandered, just that alone is a good thing. It means that you are training your meta-attention. Right? So the first thing is that is not a failure. That is success. Right? And then after that, you bring what you do next is to bring attention back. And when you bring attention back, it is like doing one bicep curl. Every time you bring a wandering attention back, it's like training your muscles of attention just a little bit more. So if you do it a lot, then your muscle becomes very strong. And then you get to a mind where you can bring attention back very quickly, very often. And if you do it quickly and often enough, your concentration becomes very good. And here's the analogy. Analogy is riding a bicycle. Right? The secret of keeping balance is micro recoveries. Right? Every time you're like tending a bit to the left, you micro recover to the right. Every time you micro recover to the left. And micro recovery done quickly and often enough creates the effect of continuous balance. And it's the same with attention. Attention, recovering quickly and often enough, creates the effect of continuous concentration, continuous attention, which is concentration. So embedded in what I just said, there are 3 or 4 very important principles. The first principle is that it is not about stability, it's about recovery. It's recovering of attention. The second principle, even more important, if you remember only one principle, remember this one, which is there is no way to do this wrong. Because every time your attention wanders away, you bring it back, it's strengthening. Right? There's no wrong way to do this. The analogy is, bicep again. We never think to ourselves, wow, now I'm doing this right, now I'm doing this wrong. This is right, this is wrong. Success, failure, success, failure. Right? We never think of that, right? Because we know that this thing is part of the growth, right? Because this thing is to prepare for the struggle. And it's the same with the mindfulness. Attention wanders away, bring back. That is the growth. So there is no way to be a bad meditator. Yeah. Thank you. Is there a second question? How do I deal with it? Unwholesome emotion. If it's gluttony, I just follow it. Besides gluttony, I mean. In general, oh yeah, something funny. So my favorite sin is gluttony. My second favorite sin is vanity. So they cancel each other out. So because I like to eat it, but I don't look good at the same time. Oh, okay. Sorry. Back to your question. In general, there are three ways to deal with any afflictive emotions or painful emotions. There is the attention, the attentional step, the affective step, and the cognitive step. So I give a rough idea what it means. The attention, so let's say anger. Taking anger as an example. You're triggered. Somebody says something that makes you very angry. So what do you do? First thing is the mind of calm and clear on demand, which you practice with mindfulness. Right? Bring attention to the breath. So the two steps are stop and breathe. Right? So that is an attentional step because you're bringing attention from what is afflicting you to the breath. And then you breathe. And the reason you breathe, besides the attention changing, is that every time you breathe, you stimulate the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that runs from here all the way down, extending to the chest and organs. And every time you breathe deeply and slowly, you're stimulating that vagus nerve, and it has the effect of calming down the body. The last step is the cognitive step, thinking about this. So these two steps I just told you, they are necessary but insufficient. Right? What does that mean? That means that if every time you got triggered, you can calm down. You can calm down, but the issue never resolves. The only way to resolve is to reflect and figure out what's triggering me. How is it? Must be how will it affect my ego? And so on and so forth. Right? All these issues. Think about the issues, and then think about how to respond to those issues in the most compassionate, kindest way. So this is the whole package. This in general. Thank you. Yes, there's a question here. And then after that, this gentleman over there. Okay.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
Right, what you have shared tonight, I guess, is very good for successful leaders. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts about how do we go about practicing it if you are not really high in the organization and you're just at the working level? How do you go about doing it? Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, a couple of thoughts in my mind all at the same time. I'm trying to organize it. Again, I think it's best to start with a story. I learned this from the IBM CEO at the time when I was an intern over there. I think it's Gil Amelio, and he said something that stayed with me for the rest of my life. He says, if you're given a job, don't care it doesn't matter what a job is. Just do your best. It doesn't matter if it's a crappy job. There's no future there, and just always do your best. Because if you always do your best, eventually you get noticed. Eventually, they say, this big job, somebody needs to do this, we need somebody reliable, get stuff done. Oh, that guy, he always gets stuff done. Maybe he's the guy. Right? So always doing your best creates the conditions where if and as and when the opportunity arises, you're there to take it. The other thought in my mind is something, if you have my book, is in the motivation chapter. I think it's a chapter called about rolling oceans. And it is about self-awareness, specifically knowing what you want to do when you grow up. Like, what are your deepest values? What matter to you? What's meaningful to you? The reason that's important, because if you are aware of this, then when opportunity arises, opportunity opens up, you're there to catch it. Say, oh, that job, I want a job because that's meaningful to me. For other people, the opportunity just passed by them. but you catch it. And other people think, how come you're so lucky? How come you always get the breaks? It's not you're lucky. I mean, you're lucky, but also you know what to look out for. And that's important, partly because your happiness. That if you're doing something meaningful to you, be happy. But also, if something meaningful to you that you are passionate about, you become very good at this. And when you become very good at it, you get your promotions. And eventually, you'll be the guy up there who other people complain about. No, I'm kidding. What other people look up to. And then that's how you affect change. That's my thing. Thank you. There's a gentleman over there.
Okay, thanks for the talk, and I definitely can feel the goodness coming out from that. And you mentioned that you're part of a team that was researching, compassion and happiness and things like that. So, can you point us to some of the online resources that can help us to further read something about that?
Yes.
Besides buying a book, or keep on using Google to search and search. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, but just a correct minor point, which is I didn't do any of the research. I just founded the organization, that's all. I just give them money. And the center, so you can go to compassion.stanford.edu. There's all the resources are there. Let me see, any other resources I can think of right now? Oh, there's another one, which is the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, SIYLI.org. And SIYL is pronounced as silly, yeah. I know, I cannot find an important organization without giving a silly name. Yeah. So I'm the silly chairman. I made a joke about it. I say, why they make me chair? Right? Because they needed a chair. They treat me like furniture. We need a chair. Meng, come here. Now we need a table. Sorry, there was a question over here? Yes.
Firstly, thanks, Chade-Meng, for a very inspiring talk this evening. My question is that tomorrow, when we wake up in the morning,
yes.
When the night has passed, what are some of the immediate practical steps that you can advise that we can undertake to work towards this path of the mindset of really compassion?
Okay. Yeah. First question, are you a mindfulness meditator?
I'm not actually.
Okay,
yeah.
That's the first thing. Okay. Practice mindfulness. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm the laziest meditation teacher in the world. And you know that because my assignment to my students is 1 breath a day. 1 breath. But you have to commit to that 1 breath, okay? I mean, for the rest of your life, 1 day, 1 breath a day. Why is that important? There are a couple of reasons. The first reason is the intention. The intention of wanting to take that 1 breath is also intention of wanting to develop yourself. That intention, if you think of it often enough, it becomes a mental habit. Therefore, creating the intention is by itself a meditation. So that's one. The second thing is momentum. So now you're not ready to do mindfulness, why so busy, why got time, and so on and so forth, right? But if you have the momentum, 1 breath a day, when you're ready, you're there. There's a third one, which is that 1 breath can lead to longer breaths. I tell a story. I have a friend called Gopi in Google. And Gopi's wish is to do 1 hour of mindfulness meditation a day. And what's the total number of days in his life he's done that? 0. So he came to me. He said, Meng, you're so wise. I said, yeah, whatever. And he was like, since you're so wise, tell me, how do I do that? I said, easy, 1 breath a day. She said, really? He said, yeah, that's it, 1 breath a day. So he went home that day, and because he's a overperformer. I mean, in Google, we're all overperformers, by the way. Not just overperform, he wants to show me, show that Meng, So instead of 1 breath, he does 10. 10 breaths a day, wow. And then after his 10th breath, he does that for a while, and then he realized 1 hour is just 1 breath for a long time, that's all. Just a lot of 1 breath. And then sitting just became longer and longer. And it became 1 hour a day. So it's doable. So first step, mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness is going to be the foundation of changing your life. If you don't practice mindfulness, you cannot change your life. And the same with exercise. If you don't exercise, you don't go to the gym, you never have a strong body. They never do things that require strength and endurance. And same in mindfulness. If you don't practice mindfulness, you'll never be able to do things that requires attentional ability and so on. Right? Calm mind, calm and clear mind. You don't have the mind, that's it. So first thing, mindfulness. Second thing, in addition to that, if you still have time after your one breath, is loving kindness. Very powerful practice. And like I say, it's very simple to practice. Look at a random human being, let's create a thought. I wish for this person to be happy. Once a day, that's all. If you can do more than once a day, do once every couple of hours. And same with mindfulness, by the way. You can do more than once a day, do one every couple of hours. Do two even better. And then the life will change. And then you'll be a bodhisattva.
I always find it it's admirable for people who can do well in partnership, dual leadership, I call that, like the HP,
yes,
like Apple, Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that, but I find it, for me, I was in IT line before, I find the partnership, for me, practically, it's a little difficult. It's always either power hungry, there's always conflict of interest from various factors. That I always find it...
partnership.
Yeah, partnership is always very difficult to manage because probably it's communication problem. So I don't understand why I tried twice and the two partnership failed. So I always think upon, how come people can do it? How come I cannot do it? Sometimes even a fishball noodle, brothers, the partnership, they work very well. I really admire them. How did they do it? I find it difficult. Yeah, because I always like the idea of teamwork. But however, for my side, it failed.
Okay. So I don't know whether my answer will fit your specific situation, but I'll give you one general answer, which I found fascinating when I first learned about it. And the key word is this. The key word is fun. So in the study of what makes a successful startup, it turns out that one of the major factors that determines the success of a startup is whether the founders are having fun, specifically with each other. If they're not having fun, don't invest in a company. They're going to fail. Right? So fun is the main thing. And the reason fun is such a main thing is because a startup will always run into trouble. And then if they're not having fun with each other in good times, in bad times, they're not going to work together. Right? So maybe the advice is find people that you're happy with, you can have fun with. So that could be it. Yeah, okay. Maybe there's one lady here with a hand up just now. That's you, yeah. And then maybe you have the last question. Okay.
I'll keep it real quick. So I have a question on mindfulness because I've tried practicing it since I listened to your talk on Sunday.
Okay.
And then sometimes I find that when I'm still, suddenly my mind becomes more receptive, like to the surroundings, like the grass is greener or I hear the bird chirping.
Well done.
So I don't know whether that is part of mindfulness, I should continue it, or whether there's a distraction, I should bring my mind back.
Continue it. So that's the first thing you might find, is that your perception becomes clearer. Yeah, it's a good sign. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like blank mind focus on my breath. I can continue to be perceptive to surroundings.
Correct. One way to look at it is this. In mindfulness, one of the best mind is a receptive mind. And there's a very nice analogy, which is the analogy of a host of a house who's welcoming. Right? His door is always open. He's always nice. Whoever comes to his house, he always greets them. He welcomes them. He allows them in. He allows them to stay for as long as they want. And when they leave, he allows them to leave. So there's letting in, letting be, and letting go. And this is the mind of mindfulness.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You have the last question of the day. That lady over there, she had her hand up just now.
Thanks, Ming. It's a privilege. And so seeing similarities, like you, I believe in compassion.
Yes.
Like you, I work with a lot of engineers.
Yes. I'm so sorry.
And I understand. Unlike you, I'm a lot less accomplished in my practice, okay? Although I would like to do some of the sharing like what you're doing, I'm definitely nowhere near. Have you ever, in your path, before you became who you are today? Now, of course, you started from a high place, right?
Really?
Yeah. Relatively, we
Okay.
believe, right?
Okay. I don't know.
Have you ever had people go, "What's with this guy? Is he for real?" And how do you deal with that?
All the time.
How do you deal with that?
Like that, lor. It's like, okay. Let me see. There must be a better answer in addition to that, though. The general framework is this. There is something that Buddha said which I really like. There are a couple of things. Right? One of them is to be free from attachment to praise and blame. Right? Whatever they say about you, reflects more to me, reflects more on them than reflects on me. Especially the adoration. So I'm at the what's called receiving end of a lot of adoration, and then but I look at myself, I'm just me leh. I said, what's that to admire about this guy, right? So I think it reflects more on people than on me, and it's true on the other end. There are a couple of people who are really angry at me. Right? I don't know why. I mean, I saw a particular book review. So all my book reviews are very positive. Right? This book is great. This guy changed my life. Blah blah blah. There's one book review very nasty, and he wrote about 19th century Russia. I have no idea what I'm. I read it 3 times. I don't get it. My publisher read it. They don't get it. So it reflects more on him. There's something about him something about say that really triggered him. That's in him. So the only thing I can do, I practice a few things. One thing I practice is something called writing on water. And this is the Buddha's beautiful description of the enlightened mind. He said the enlightened mind is like writing on water. Right? So the moment it's written, it disappears. So the afflictive emotions appear in the enlightened mind. It's like writing on water. The moment it's formed, it disappears. So I try to practice that. The other thing I try to practice is this idea of having a sense of humor with my ego. Ego as defined as my sense of self-importance. And the way I do it is I imagine myself to simultaneously be as grandiose as Mount Fuji and as insignificant as a grain of sand at the same time. And it turns out they're both necessary, like right here. Like for me to stand here and speak to you with this appearance of confidence, for me to do that, I must feel that I deserve to be here. Right? So I must have that quote-unquote that ego. To say, of course I deserve here, I know, I'm so great. At the same time, so if I don't do that, I cannot serve you. At the same time, I must tell myself, which is also true, that I'm like insignificant. Right? The only reason I'm here is to serve you. Right? There's no other reason. There's nothing to do with me. So have both minds at the same time, and then just have a sense of humor. So it's all very funny, right? At the end of it, but in closing, can I read a poem to you? I wrote this poem a couple of days ago, and by the way, anybody here who doesn't speak Chinese, okay, if you don't speak, I apologize to you, because I wrote a poem in Chinese, and the translation not very good. But it's a poem about my ambition. And so I read the Chinese. I try to remember it because I wrote it only like a couple of weeks ago. Let's see if I can remember. And that poem basically summarizes what I just said about ambition and greatness and so on. And the poem title is 野心 ambition. Let me see if I remember. 英雄霸业如逝水，唯有菩提万事留。笑看一生小成就，佛陀微笑做心头。Sorry, yeah, it's on my blog. Can I say it one more time? Okay. It's on my blog and read, but it's a 英雄霸业如逝水。Like heroes, I can interpret. Heroes and conquests are like flowing water. 唯有菩提万事留. Only the enlightened mind lasts 10,000 generations. 笑看一生小成就. Looking at my small achievements and laughing. 佛陀微笑做心头. Buddha in my heart smiling. And with that, thank you very much for being here.